You clicking on this video means that you probably like deck building, and in my opinion, I think that there are two main categories of people who brew commander decks. You have the people who, over the course of months and years, have that one pet deck that just speaks to them. They upgrade the cards, they get the cool alt arts, the whole 9 yards whenever it comes to optimizing that one deck. And then you have the other side of things, the people who every time you see them at the LGS, they have a completely new arsenal of decks that they come to play with. And of course, almost no player is cookie cutter put into one of these different categories. I, for instance, have one deck that I've had for almost 8 months now, but besides that, consistently turn out new decks to play with. But then whenever I thought about these two different sides of deck building, it made me ask the question of if one of these archetypes is better than the other. Should commander players focus on building more quality or a larger quantity of commander decks? And I actually have a very strong opinion on which one is better that applies to all types of players, be it someone who is brand new to a person who's been playing Magic for years. And to rip this band-aid right off, this heavily depends on where you are in your Magic journey. Starting where everyone else did, maybe you're someone brand new to the Commander format or just Magic as a whole. I strongly believe that newbies should be constantly turning out new Commander decks over trying to build the perfect one from the start, highly prioritizing quantity over quality. To put this into perspective, let's say that I took a kid. Okay, wow, that was worded really badly. Let's say that a person who has never done pot making is told to make the best pot that they can. They have a long time to make it, but they can only make one pot. Then we have another person who is new to pot making as well, but is told to make as many pots as possible in the same amount of time. And now I would say that some people would assume that at the end of this, the person who prioritized making one very high quality pot would have the better product overall at the end. But in the case study in the book Art and Fear, the opposite was presented as true. Looking at the group of people in this case study that almost mass-produced clay pots, they ended up with some of the highest quality in the entire study. And so, while this is a cool story, how does it apply to deck building? Let's go all the way back to that new player. Much like the people in the case study that didn't know how to make pots, they don't know how to really make decks. You can watch great videos on how to craft decks, how much interaction you need, how to find synergies, but you will never truly know what works and what doesn't work for you until you actually build a deck and find out. Much like the people who prioritize quality over quantity in the case study, you might look at cards that seem fun and flavorful for a deck, but once you get into a game and find out it doesn't work nearly as good as you thought it did, it can be disheartening. And so I generally think that new players should be just pumping out commander decks over trying to make one perfect. You should still be putting in effort to try and make them synergistic and functional, but to new players out there, understand that there are a lot of things to learn whenever it comes to the nuance and complexity of deck building and just finding synergies in Commander that even people that have been playing for years haven't really fully figured out yet. But now, in my opinion, this quantity over quality is not specific to new players, but rather to anyone who is new to something in Commander. Let's say that you're someone who's been playing for a few years, but you have never built a Spellslinger deck. While you are going to have a lot more knowledge of what's good and what's not from a newer player, I would still strongly advise you try and just pump out a few Spellslinger decks and see how they work. Do you like playing with a commander that's more of an engine getting your game plan online, or do you enjoy having a commander that's just a big payoff to all of the spells that you're casting? Whenever you take that time as someone new to a certain aspect or just Magic at large to go all out and build as much as you can, you will understand what works and what doesn't much faster and more effectively than a person who is trying to just make one great deck by itself. And this way of thinking has value not only in letting you grow as a Magic player and a deck builder, but also can make you financially happier. It's kind of a core event for every Magic player to brew a deck, love it on Moxfield, order all the cards and get it in paper, but then you immediately hate it. And while I'm not saying, of course, that this can't happen if you speed blitz out decks, I think that you can much more reliably say that you actually like how a deck plays whenever you have built multiple different types of decks in that archetype. The main goal is to have 4 or 5 decks that you speed brewed and built, and have one that is the champion that you just really loved more than any of the other ones. Then you can take cards from the other list and build that one up, and all of a sudden you have a better deck than you would have if you just hyper-focused on one of these commanders. But so now, what are my opinions on what a more experienced Magic player should do? And I would say that for the most part, a more experienced Magic player can really focus on the quality of their decks over the quantity. Someone who has been playing Reanimator for years and sees a new graveyard-style commander doesn't need to put in as much time theory crafting as a new player would to this archetype. But now with that being said, that player should still be experimenting, just to a much more precise degree. To go back to new players that I'm telling to go for more quantity with their deck building, I would recommend that they go onto Moxfield and ham out things that are completely different. Whether that's someone trying to build Voltron, I would say to them to ham out 3 commanders that are completely different in playstyle, colors, game plan, and really get a diversity in what you are playing with on these playtests. Or you can pick a single commander and build it in 3 completely different ways and see how one commander plays differently in each of those routes that you can take. These are drastic and vast changes, so you can really see the difference you can have in a single commander or in a single archetype, trying to really hone in what you enjoy about this specific thing in Magic. But now for those more experienced players that I'm telling to go for more quality over quantity, you can take out the general experimenting for the more pinpoint test and how cards work. Maybe you are someone who has already built and likes Spellslinger decks and want to build the new Iroh. You already understand what you like to play and what works in Spellslinger decks, so a majority of the deck you can build and already know that it will not only be functional, but an enjoyable deck for you to play. But now you get the fun of experimenting with the minute things of a deck. For Iroh, this means you can throw in and swap out, over a few playtests, the different lessons from the Avatar or the Strixhaven set and see which lessons feel good and enjoyable for you to play with. And of course, like the 2 categories of commander players that I said from before, this is a big spectrum on how much you should be doing quantity and quality with your decks. For instance, maybe you built a spider deck a few years ago, but with all of the new spiders from the Spider-Man set, you want to jump back and build a new one. While on one hand, you have that experience, that understanding of what worked in that archetype with your old deck, you should still be experimenting because of all of the different new spiders from the Spider-Man set you don't have experience with, and also the new generic creature type support for you to consider in this new deck. And of course, I would say that the biggest pushback I see to this is that building a complete 100 card commander deck is very difficult and sometimes draining, more so whenever you have a YouTuber saying that you should be building multiple just to find out what you do and don't like. And to that, yeah, I would agree, and it's something I struggle with myself. You can see through my past videos of things like 10 card mini commander decks, I'm trying to constantly narrow down this experimental phase so I can have a more functioning commander deck quicker. I would say as a whole, experimenting before you buy is a surefire way to not only improve yourself as a deck builder, but to save your wallet as well. Because now, as you build and brew multiple decks, multiple archetypes as your Magic career evolves, you'll start to slowly transition out of the need for quantity over to quality. I have a love for Voltron, I talk about it all the time on this channel, and have built an extreme amount of decks around that archetype. So whenever I see a new commander that I want to brew and make it into a Voltron deck, I immediately already know a whole bunch of things that work for me and what I like. So now the majority of the deck is functional. And that's because of these moments that I took time to experiment and fully understand what I enjoyed about that archetype. So now I can just throw in 10 to 15 cards that I want to experiment with and still know overall I'm going to enjoy the deck. The goal to me recommending quantity over quality to new players is to not waste your time telling you to make 4 different decks knowing that you're only going to probably enjoy one of them. It's putting in that time to understand which of those decks you enjoy and why, so you don't waste your time and money buying a deck you don't.